Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us. Minister LeBlanc, this has been a standing meeting with our friends here, I think, for the last 4 or 5 days. We just had a really positive meeting talking about tariffs, talking about border security. I saw the plan for border security. It's phenomenal. As I said to Minister LeBlanc, have Mr. McGuinty get out there and start promoting it, because it is a solid plan. We look forward to sitting down with all the premiers tomorrow, and I just want to thank Minister LeBlanc. Full disclosure, I think the world of him, and so do all the other premiers. He's very pragmatic. He understands, and he's done a tremendous job on many ministries, but especially this one. He's foregoing his leadership because he's putting Canada first, and I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for the job that you've done and how you've worked collaboratively with us for the last 6.5 years, and continue to work collaboratively together. So we're taking a Team Canada approach on this. We're going to work closely with all the other premiers, along with the federal government. They play a key role. This is their file. We're there to support them. So I'll pass it over to you, Minister.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Moi, je suis très content d'être avec mon ami, le Premier ministre de l'Ontario, le Premier ministre Ford. Comme il a dit, nous avons eu une discussion, je pense, très positive pour préparer la conversation demain à Ottawa avec les autres premiers ministres, et surtout de rassurer les Canadiens, les citoyens de l'Ontario, qu'on va travailler ensemble, qu'on va appuyer les industries canadiennes, les travailleurs canadiens et canadiennes face aux menaces de tarifs douaniers. I had a chance to talk to Premier Ford. I have appreciated his friendship. I have appreciated his leadership as a federal minister. I think the country is very lucky at this moment in the rotation of the Council of the Federation that Premier Ford is chairing the Council of the Federation. I said this to him. I said this to my colleague, his finance minister. Premier Ford has stood up for the Canadian economy, for workers across the country, in a way that frankly makes him a very valuable partner for the Government of Canada. So we talked about potential scenarios to respond to the threat of tariffs, obviously recognizing the real impact it would have on the economy of Ontario, on Ontario workers and businesses. The Government of Canada will, of course, be there to support industries and workers in collaboration with Premier Ford and his government. And tomorrow's conversation allows all of us to discuss how we can be ready next week when we see ultimately what the Americans propose. But for me to be here at Queen's Park with Premier Ford, as I say, who's become a friend of mine, somebody I'm proud to work with, somebody who stood up for our country at tough moments and is doing so again. It's a privilege to be here, and I can't imagine, Doug, that you and I are looking forward anything more than to answer questions from the journalists now.
Always do.
Yeah, no, that's why I get up in the morning.
Does the federal government have an estimate for how many job losses that could come as a result of 25% tariffs across the board on Canadian goods?
So the Finance Department has obviously done a lot of that modeling. I had a chance to talk to the CEOs of the large banks over the last 24 hours. You can imagine that they're obviously doing a lot of that modeling. The Premier and I spoke about the real impacts that these tariffs would have to workers obviously in Ontario, but across the country. We're not going to speculate on what exactly are different scenarios. Next week, we think we'll know the precise details of what these tariffs will mean to the Canadian economy, and we'll be ready, of course, to respond from a position of strength, and we hope as a unified country. But it doesn't serve any purpose. I get that everybody is imagining complicated circumstances. We're very much on the job, and we're working together. And when we see the full extent of what the American proposal is, of course, we'll respond.
En français, peut-être, est-ce que vous pensez que c'est réaliste? Doug Ford parle de 500 000 emplois en péril en Ontario. Vous pensez que c'est réaliste, ces chiffres-là?
Mais, comme j'ai dit en anglais il y a quelques moments, évidemment, nous sommes très inquiets avec l'idée d'imposer des tarifs douaniers à ce niveau-là, à ce pourcentage-là. Ça va être très néfaste pour l'économie américaine en même temps, c'est sûr. Mais le Premier ministre et moi, on a discuté comment on pourrait être en mesure de répliquer d'une position de force. On veut appuyer l'économie canadienne, on veut appuyer les travailleurs canadiens. Alors, la conversation était, c'est quoi les options en termes de réponse? Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire ensemble, les premiers ministres des provinces et territoires avec le gouvernement fédéral? On ne va pas spéculer sur le nombre d'emplois, sur quel secteur, à quel moment, parce que, comme on a dit, à travers le pays, il pourra avoir des impacts différents. L'important, c'est qu'on travaille ensemble pour y répondre, et c'est précisément ce que nous allons faire.
Mr. LeBlanc, Premier Ford has been talking about spending tens of billions of dollars and sometimes stimulus in response to the tariffs. Is the federal government contemplating something similar in scale, bigger? What can you tell us?
So I had a chance both with the Premier and his finance minister to talk about how we could work together to support the Canadian economy, to support workers in Ontario and across the country and businesses when we see the scale and impact of the American action. I think people need to know that we'll work together, as we always have, with the provinces and territories to support businesses and workers. This is a circumstance that Canadian industry and Canadian workers didn't create. If the American government takes this decision, our obligation is to work together and to support the economy of the country, but also to respond in a firm, unified way. This isn't good for the American economy either. And those are the conversations that we've been having. And the Premier talked to me about conversations with governors and senators and business leaders in the United States. This is exactly the work that we can do together with Canadian business leaders. The Americans, I think, will come to understand that this sort of race to the basement doesn't help anybody. So let's figure out together how we can support Canadian workers. And we're open to all good ideas like that.
Ford, are you still of the opinion that the federal government needs to get its act together after hearing what the...
Well, I think I addressed that. I was talking about the border, security, and Minister LeBlanc laid out the plan. It's a fabulous plan. Let's get out there and tell the people of Canada they've worked hard on it. So what I said this morning after seeing the plan, it's a solid plan, and he's going to work, the Minister McGuinty will work hand in hand with people like Minister Kersner, our OPP, RCMP, CBSA, the U.S. Border Patrol, DEA. It's a collective, collaborative group that are going to secure our borders. But the numbers that I have seen, it's impressive, and the plan's impressive as well.
What's the plan? Get some specifics about what this plan involves.
I'll leave that up to the federal government. I'll leave that up to Minister McGuinty to get out there and put the plan in front of the Canadian people. But it's a solid plan. And if it wasn't a solid plan, I'd be saying it wasn't.
With Minister McGuinty?
I don't know him. I wouldn't know him if he walked through the door right now.
On the Premier and I went over some of the border plan. We shared that. I was at Mar-a-Lago with Howard Lutnick and Doug Burgum, two of the incoming secretaries in the new administration, and went through, like we did with the Premier, $1.3 billion of incremental spending to give the RCMP and CBSA things like high-range drones, long-range drones, surveillance towers, 80 new canine units to search fentanyl at the border, a sort of joint air command that will include new, pretty visible helicopters for the RCMP. There's a whole more boots on the ground. There'll be additional officers. A lot of this work was done between the RCMP and the OPP. Commissioner Karik has been a great partner, I know, for the RCMP and border services. So as the Premier said, if we can work with Ontario law enforcement and federal agencies, this is the kind of work that Canadians expect us to do.
Minister McGuinty, what do you make of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith going down and meeting with Donald Trump? Do you feel, Premier Doug Ford has also been trying to secure a meeting as well, do you feel like premiers having meetings one-on-one with the incoming president is detrimental, or is it helpful?
Maybe the Premier wants to. So our view is that Canada needs to work together. If premiers and business leaders have contacts in the United States where they can talk to their customers, their business partners, political partners, all of that is value added if we make the case together that these tariffs will hurt the American economy, it'll hurt American consumers. It's obviously not good for the economy of Canada, and we'll be there to defend the Canadian economy and Canadian workers. But we think it's important, and that would be the meeting tomorrow, that the country work together. And as I said, Premier Ford's leadership at the Council of the Federation comes at a very important moment for the country. We're going to be working with him as the chair of the Council of the Federation. Premier Ford has been an effective advocate for the interest of the Canadian economy. So I'll continue to work with him. We talked about potentially going to Washington after we see what comes next week in terms of decisions. We may go and visit the border with Michael Kersner and others in Windsor, for example. All of these are occasions to show Canadians, and by consequence Americans as well, that we're very much on the job and share their concerns on things like border security.
But Premier Smith has specifically said that there would be a national unity crisis if energy exports were on the table. So is your government in any way considering the restriction of oil from Alberta to the United States?
So what we've said is that the only responsible thing for the national government is to acknowledge that all options are on the table. But at what point do you deploy what option, at what level? Obviously, we want to see what the American action is next week, if it comes next week. So I've been hanging around politics long enough to know that hypothetical questions are like big bear traps that you can fall into. That feels like one. But I think as I'm too big to land in a bear trap. Doug and I would. So I think we need to be ready to deploy all of the measures necessary to defend the Canadian economy, but we're not going to publicly speculate what is or what isn't an option. Let's see what the Americans do next week, and let's work with premiers and business leaders to find the best response for Canada.
This is the final question.
Alors, en ce qui a trait aux options de riposte pour le Canada, c'est sûr que toutes les options vont être considérées. On ne va pas commencer la conversation en excluant ou en enlevant des options. On va travailler avec les personnes d'affaires, on va travailler avec les représentants des travailleurs, évidemment des premiers ministres des provinces. Je suis très content d'avoir l'occasion demain de discuter avec le premier ministre Legault, avec ses ministres, comment on peut travailler ensemble. C'est exactement le message du premier ministre Ford. On ne commence pas la conversation en excluant des mesures de riposte, mais en même temps, on ne commence pas à imaginer des scénarios sans savoir précisément qu'est-ce que les Américains vont proposer.
That was the final question. Thank you.
Est-ce que c'est le bon moment d'aller en élection alors qu'il y a des rumeurs qui persistent? Est-ce que ça ne créerait pas plus d'instabilité?
So, Doug, they want me to speculate on a potential election in Ontario. So, again, that looks like another big bear trap that I'm not going to fall in. If I wanted to run for the legislature in Ontario, I'd have to live here. It's a great place to visit. I'm not a member of this legislature. The Ontario government will make the decisions they want. Le gouvernement de l'Ontario est tout à fait souverain à prendre leurs décisions comme ils voudront. L'importance pour nous, au gouvernement fédéral, c'est de travailler avec les provinces d'une façon cohérente.
Thank you.
That's great. I just want to thank Minister LeBlanc for his leadership once again. We look forward to working collaboratively with all the premiers across the country and along with the federal government. So thank you for your leadership. We'll head over there. Thank you.
Merci.